huge ship. It's 887 feet 3 inches from the bow to the stern. From the keel, 38 feet underwater, to the top of the mast is well over 200 feet. Now, for as big as she is, she's relatively narrow, about 108 feet 2 inches. And the reason for that is the Panama Canal. Until recently, the Panama Canal was 110 feet wide. And when the Missouri made her way through there, she only had about 11 inches of clearance on either side, and sort of just bumped and scraped her way through. And when they got to the far side, they had to drop crew over to repaint the sides of the ship. The ship displaces 58,000 tons. That means when fully loaded, she weighs 58,000 tons. Now, just to give you a little bit of a comparison, if you look at the modern destroyers across the harbor over there, probably in the neighborhood of about 8,500 tons, making Missouri about 6 to 8 times as big as those modern ships. Then if you look at the old World War II destroyers, they weighed about 2,100 tons. So the Missouri is about, in terms of displacement, was about 30 times as big as those old ships, the old destroyers. So as I say, she's a massive ship. Now, during Korea and World War II, the ship's complement was 2,700 officers and enlisted. After they modernized the ship, removed all those aircraft weapons, crew size dropped down to about 1,800. At her peak, or in her prime, she was capable of doing 33 knots. That's about 40-mile-an-hour land speed. So she was fast, and she had to be fast to keep up with the carriers that she was out there in part to help protect. Any questions so far? Good.
You'd said it was, the keel was laid in 41, January 41, did you say?
January 41.
And how long did it take for the ship to be launched?
3 years.
It took that long to build it?
Oh, yeah. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about the deck that we're standing on here. Originally, the Missouri had 2-inch thick teak decking throughout, all 53,000 square feet of decking. The reason for that was, first of all, when the ship was first built, there was no air conditioning. So the 2 inches of wood decking actually provided some insulation, made the spaces below a little bit more habitable. The reason for teak in particular is when it gets wet, it's not particularly slippery. Good thing when you're at sea or when you're conducting tours in the rain, as I've done, and I've proven it's not too slippery. And then finally, wood deck is good because it's a non-spark surface. And when you're handling projectiles and powder and other volatile things, that's also a good trait, good thing to have. Now, in the 1980s, when they modernized the ship, someone in their infinite wisdom decided that they'd tear up all the old 2-inch decking, and they put down 1 inch of Douglas fir and 1 inch of teak. Well, Douglas fir simply does not hold up to the wet conditions that a ship like this is subjected to, and in pretty short order, that began to deteriorate, and the metal deck below that began to rust. We had weeds growing up between the boards, and so now we're in the process of replacing all of the decking again. But now what we're doing, and this is all new, this is within the last year or so, now we put down a 1-inch layer of polyurethane, which will probably last a very, very long time. And then we put 1 inch of teak on top of that. This is teak that you're looking at. We're not concerned about insulation because the occupied spaces of the ship now are air conditioned, and but we wanted the teak to make sure that we look authentic. And of course, the non-slip surface is a good thing too. Back in about 5 years, all of it should be done. That's what I'm told to tell you folks. All right, let's talk about the 16-inch turrets. We have 3 turrets with 9 barrels or rifles each. Each one of those rifles or barrels weighs 239,000 pounds. They're massive, about the same weight as a space shuttle. Now what you see above deck here is only part of the picture. Below each one of these turrets are 5 decks of powder storage, magazines for projectiles, all the equipment that's necessary to operate these huge turrets. Now each one of the turrets required a minimum of 77 sailors to operate it, and they actually preferred to have closer to 100 and sometimes in excess of 100 in each one of the turrets. And a well-trained crew could actually fire a round from each rifle or each barrel every 30 seconds, 2 rounds a minute. And if you ever get a chance to see the loading operations, that was quite a feat. At least I feel it was quite a feat. Now, when a projectile is fired from one of these barrels, it leaves the barrel at Mach 2, about 2,500 feet per second. The deadly accurate range on these 16-inch guns was 23 miles. So a projectile being fired out at 23 miles will take about 90 seconds to get to the target. But in its flight there, it's probably going to get up over 30,000 feet. So it's up there in airline country. The ship fired 2 different kinds of projectiles. There's one laying on its side up there in front of the number 1 turret. That's an armor-piercing projectile. It was capable of penetrating 17 inches of steel or 30 feet of reinforced concrete before it even exploded. Pretty mean weapon. The other projectile that they fired was a high explosive, generally used against soft targets on land. And depending on where it landed, it could easily leave a crater 50 feet across and 20 feet deep. So the best advice was you didn't want to be anywhere close to where these things were landing. Now, we've got our crowd in front of us here, but to the left of the projectile there, when we walk around, you'll see an upright canister with a white bag. That bag represents the powder bags that were used to fire these projectiles. Each one of the powder bags weighed 110 pounds, and it took 6 of them to fire a projectile, or 660 pounds of powder. And it didn't matter whether you're firing at 10 miles or 23 miles. It was still 6 bags of powder. The only thing that would change would be the elevation on the rifles themselves. Now the ship always fired out to port or starboard for a couple reasons. The primary reason is tactical. You want all your guns to bear in the same direction. But they never fired directly forward, even when this antenna array wasn't here. The reason being the shock wave from firing these huge guns would have literally torn up this wood deck, and certainly didn't want to do that. Now, one of the questions we get asked frequently is, let's say we're firing out to starboard in a broadside, which means we're firing all 9 barrels at the same time. How much does the ship move? And it's a trick question because the ship does not move. And the reason for that is, first of all, as I described a little earlier, it is a massive ship. 58,000 tons and 38 feet of that's underwater. The other reason is each one of these rifles has a recoil mechanism that allows it to recoil about 4 feet, and that just absorbs a tremendous amount of energy. So when we're firing out, say broadside to the starboard side, the ship doesn't move sideways, it doesn't list. The only thing that moves the ship is the ship's propulsion system and the ocean itself. Okay, any questions about the 16-inch? Okay, then real quickly, in addition to the 16-inch, the ship originally had 10, but now there are 6 5-inch 38 dual barrel mounts. You can see one sticking out here on the starboard side. They had a range of about 9 miles and could be fired at the rate of about 15 rounds a minute. Very effective anti-aircraft weapons. Okay, any questions? Okay, we're going to go up on the surrender deck. We have a set of stairs to go up, so please hold on to the rails and follow me, please.